Have you ever spent so long waiting for someone that the waiting itself became your whole life? Every evening at exactly 6:17, Eleanor Whitmore would sit by the front window of her small blue house at the edge of town, rain or shine, summer heat or winter frost. For 20 years, she waited for a message that never came. The neighbors noticed, of course. In a town as quiet as Belmere, routines became legends. Children grew up pointing at the lace-curtained window, whispering about the woman who always stared down the road as if expecting someone to appear. Some said she was waiting for a lost love. Others thought she was simply lonely. But no one knew the truth. Not until the day the letter finally arrived. It all began in the spring of 1986, when Eleanor was just 24. Belmere was alive with blooming cherry trees, and Eleanor herself seemed to bloom with them. She worked at the town library, where she spent her days shelving books and secretly dreaming of adventures beyond the borders of her little world. That's where she met Thomas Hale. Thomas wasn't from Belmere. He arrived one windy afternoon with a leather satchel slung over his shoulder and a smile that looked like it had seen both joy and heartbreak. He was a traveling photographer, passing through town to document forgotten places and the people who lived in them. He came into the library asking for local history books. Eleanor showed him where to find them, but he kept asking questions long after he had what he needed, about the town, about her favorite books, about why someone with eyes full of wanderlust had never left Belmere. And just like that, something shifted. Over the next 3 weeks, Thomas and Eleanor became inseparable. They walked along the river at sunset. They shared coffee at the diner until closing time. He showed her how to see beauty in ordinary things, a rusted bicycle, rain on a window pane, the way sunlight slipped through old church glass. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Thomas spoke of distant cities, mountain villages, and oceans so blue they looked unreal. He told stories that made the world seem vast and magical. And Eleanor, who had always lived inside books, suddenly found herself living inside a story of her own. Then came the night everything changed. They stood beneath the old train station clock, its hands frozen at 6:17. A mechanical failure the town had never bothered to fix. Thomas held Eleanor's hands, his fingers trembling slightly. "I have to leave tomorrow," he said. The words hit her like a sudden storm. He explained that his assignment was over. He was due in Europe for a new project. It would take months, maybe longer. Eleanor tried to smile, but her heart was already breaking. Then Thomas reached into his satchel and handed her a small silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of the two of them, taken by the river just days before. "Wait for my message," he told her. "When I'm settled, I'll write, then I'll come back for you. We'll start our real life together." Eleanor believed him. The next morning, she watched from the station platform as the train carried Thomas away. He leaned out the window, smiling, one hand raised in farewell. That was the last time she ever saw him. At first, waiting was easy. She checked the mailbox every morning, her heart racing at the sound of footsteps on the porch. She imagined his letters crossing oceans, delayed by weather or customs or some minor inconvenience. Weeks turned into months, but hope remained stubborn. Then months became years. Friends urged her to move on. Her mother gently suggested that Thomas might never return, but Eleanor refused to believe it. Love like theirs didn't simply vanish. So she made a ritual of waiting. Every evening at 6:17, she sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the road. It was the hour Thomas had left, the hour the station clock had stopped, the hour her life had divided into before and after. Suitors came and went. Opportunities passed her by. She remained in Belmere,
in the same blue house she inherited from her parents, holding on to a promise that grew older with her. As the years slipped by, Belmere changed. Stores closed, new families moved in, children became adults, but Eleanor's routine never changed. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in October, 20 years after Thomas had left, there was a knock at her door. Standing on the porch was a young postal worker named Caleb, his uniform damp from the storm. In his hand was an envelope, yellowed with age, its edges softened by time. "I think this belongs to you," he said. Eleanor's breath caught. Her hands shook so violently she could barely close the door. For a long moment, she simply stared at the envelope, afraid that opening it would somehow break the fragile magic of its arrival. Finally, with trembling fingers, she unfolded the letter inside. It was dated June 14th, 1986. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then at last fate has done me one kindness. I wrote to you the moment I arrived in Paris. I wrote again from Rome, then from Vienna, but I never received a reply. I feared you had changed your mind, or perhaps found someone more deserving of your love. There is something else I must tell you. Shortly after leaving Belmere, I was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors gave me little time. I spent years traveling, working when I could, always hoping to hear from you. I returned to Belmere once, 5 years after I left. I stood across the street from your house and saw a man helping you carry groceries inside. I thought you had moved on. I could not bear to disturb your happiness, so I left again. Now, as I write this from a hospital bed in London, I know my journey is ending, but I need you to know this: I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. I waited for your message too. Forever yours, Thomas." Eleanor read the letter once, then again and again. The man Thomas had seen was her brother, visiting from out of town. A single misunderstanding, a cruel twist of timing, two people, each believing they had been forgotten, each waiting for a message that never came. She wept until dawn, for the years lost, for the life they might have shared, for the love that had endured across continents, across silence, across decades. But the story did not end there. The next day, Eleanor walked to the attic and opened an old cedar chest. Inside were all the letters she had written to Thomas over the years, dozens of them, letters filled with hope, longing, anger, forgiveness, and love. She had never mailed them. She had been waiting for his first letter before sending her own. One by one, she read them. Then she did something no one expected. At the age of 44, Eleanor packed a suitcase. Using the return addresses of Thomas's old postcards and the clues in his final letter, she set out to follow the path he had taken across the world. Paris, Rome, Vienna, London. At every stop, she visited the places he had once described. She stood where he had stood, saw what he had seen, and felt in some strange way that she was finally meeting him again. In London, she found the hospital where Thomas had spent his final days. A kindly nurse remembered him, the photographer who always carried a silver locket and spoke of a woman in a small town he had never forgotten. The nurse handed Eleanor a small package Thomas had left behind. Inside was a photograph. It was Eleanor sitting by her window at 6:17, sunlight falling across her face. Thomas had taken it during his brief return to Belmere, without her knowing ever. On the back, he had written just 6 words: "Still waiting, still loving, always yours." Eleanor smiled through tears. She returned changed, not healed. Some losses never fully heal, but whole in a way she hadn't been before. She no longer sat by the window every evening. Instead, she filled her days with travel, painting, and telling Thomas's story to anyone willing to listen. Because love, she learned, is not measured by how long it lasts in person, but by how deeply it lives within us. And sometimes, the messages we wait for all our lives arrive not to bring us back to the past, but to finally set us free. So, tell me, what would you have done? Would you have kept waiting, or would you have let go? And do you believe some loves are truly meant to last forever, even when time and distance stand in the way? Because somewhere, at exactly 6:17, a woman once waited for a message that never came, only to discover that someone, somewhere, had been waiting just as long. And maybe, just maybe, someone is still waiting right now.